Hey there, welcome to your last lesson for this week. We are on Unit 2, Lesson 3. Remember, our theme is all about the oppression of different groups. So we've talked now about the oppression of African Americans and the oppression of women during this same time period as Unit 1 to the late 1800s and early 1900s. Today, excuse me, we are going to talk about the oppression of workers and how workers were being taken advantage of during this time. So we're going to hop on into these notes and then I'll explain to you what your assignment for today is going to be. So the first thing is that if you're watching this, it's most likely because you were absent from class and you're doing this to be able to catch back up. So in class, when we went through these, it took a little bit longer because we did a real good, deep analysis of these pictures that you're looking at. We talked about what did we see in these pictures? What did we think in these pictures? What did we wonder about these pictures? So clearly you're seeing people in working conditions. And then we went through and had a good discussion about this. Obviously in a video form like this, I can't necessarily do that, but I do want you to just take the time to kind of analyze what exactly you are looking at in these pictures and what the conditions for workers were like. We've got another photo here. Oh, sorry. Let me move myself out of my Bitmoji. So you have to remember that these people would be working in conditions like this all day long. So here's another picture that we looked at. We looked at what we see, what we think, what we wonder, people working in these very cramped, not necessarily the best of situations all day long, sitting there, working, getting paid almost next to nothing for doing it. Here you've got some people that are minors and their working conditions. So again, we talked about what we see, think, and wonder. This was some brutal, hard, back-breaking work that these people were doing, very dangerous work. And again, getting paid next to nothing pretty much for doing it. So the problems that we were facing or that workers were facing in the industrial era were that they were getting very low pay, they were working very long hours, they had extremely unsafe working conditions in many situations, they got no benefits. So, they get hurt on the job, sorry, you're probably going to lose your job because you can't do it anymore. There was no health insurance for them to get or anything like that. They were just working for low wages. They didn't get any time off. They got no vacation time or anything like that. They got no overtime if they worked over 40 hours a week like people do today. Those things just weren't around. There was no break times that were guaranteed for you. I'm sure some places, they would have time for lunch and stuff like that, but that wasn't guaranteed by law like it is today. So there was a lot of struggle going on for the American worker during this time period. So after talking about just the basics of those things, we then as a class went through and looked at some more photographs, specifically this time looking at child labor. So again, we did the see, think, wonder about why exactly we would be looking at children being the ones doing a lot of labor. You got to remember, kids are going to be paid less because they're not as valued of workers, and their small tiny hands and tiny bodies can fit into places that adults can't, so they would be used for that advantage as well. Again, another see, think, wonder of a young boy working. Usually the thing that people pick out first is that he's not wearing any shoes, right? He's going to work, clearly not coming from a well-to-do house and basically working without shoes on because he's just doing what he has to do. Here we go with some more pictures, another see, think, wonder of kids working in the mines under very rough conditions once again. And so talking about child labor, like I said a minute ago, they used this child labor because they could pay them less. They had small hands and small bodies that went places the adults couldn't go. And the parents would allow this to happen because the parents just had to do what they could do to survive as well. The families needed money. And then if the kids were working, they also knew where their kids were. They weren't just out on the streets. So it was almost like child care in which the kid would also get paid a small amount of money. And that kid wouldn't be taking his money and going to the local general store and buying himself a piece of candy with it. That money would go back into the hands of the family to help support the family. Here we've got some more pictures that we were taking a look at. We did another see, think, wonder here. So this time you can see that these are all pictures of women doing work. We talked yesterday about women and the kind of jobs that they would have, but they would also be treated poorly in the working place a lot. One of the most tragic things that happened in a place where women were working was a fire in New York City at a place called the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. Shirtwaist was just like a popular blouse of the time. So this was women who were creating these blouses in December, or not December, in New York City. And at 1911, there was a fire that broke out on this building, and 123 women and another 23 men actually died. And the reason for this was because there were these working conditions for these women were so bad, they didn't like trust them. So they literally locked the doors so that women couldn't get out and steal special breaks and stuff like that. This kind of accident, though, fortunately would lead to some reform and change, which we'll talk about later in this unit. But the government's going to start to say, like, we need to make sure that working places have some safety standards so that big tragedies like this don't happen again. I mean, this picture right here is a picture of women who, because they were afraid of being engulfed by the fire, jumped out of the windows, and then obviously still died as a result of doing that. So women were, going through and doing the kinds of jobs that you typically think women would be doing. Most of the women that had jobs were going to be young, poor, and single women. Once you got married, as we talked about yesterday, you were kind of expected to leave the workplace. They're usually going to have jobs that we think of as like female jobs, domestic work, so maids, working in factories, especially textile factories, sewing clothing, teachers, nurses, office work is like secretaries, so things like that. As a result of this increase of work for women, the respect levels do start to rise a little bit, and people are like, oh, look at that, women can actually be productive members of society. Crazy thought. But it is a very, very slow rise that takes place. So in order to be able to fight for the workers, what we start to see is that a lot of workers come together and they unite with the creation of unions. So these unions that were made were intended to get everybody to work together as a group. So have everybody say, we all deserve better pay. We deserve better working conditions. We deserve benefits and vacation time. If you have just one guy who's out there saying like, I want to get paid more, the boss could very well be like, sorry, if you don't like your job, bye, you're fired, go find a job somewhere else. But when you get all of the workers to unite together in these unions, then they're gonna have more power as a result, because now you're threatening the money and the profit of the actual owner of the business. So in order to try and improve these conditions, a lot of them start to negotiate, they start to strike and picket and protest to really hurt the pockets of those businessmen and the managers so that they would be able to get what they want. Because if the business owners are losing all that money, then they're going to get really upset. The thing was is that not everybody was out there supporting unions. At first, everybody kind of thought of them as these like radical individuals who were, just disrupting everything just because they wanted more. The government wasn't backing them up. The managers obviously weren't backing them up. If people went on strike, they would hire on these people known as scabs, which would be the people that would take the jobs for the managers whenever everybody else was on strike, kind of going against what the strike would actually be able to do. So not everybody is out there supporting unions. It's going to take a few decades for people to start saying like, oh, these people are actually right and they deserve to be treated better and have better conditions for work. But these unions do become really, really popular over time. So you can see here, we've got the growth of union membership from 1878 to 1904. So we can see how it goes up and it's building, it's building. There is an event called the Haymarket Riot. You'll learn more about that. And once that happens, you're going to end up having like a drop, and then it goes, and then again, it starts to become more popular. And then by the time we get to the early 1900s, union membership is really, really high, with lots and lots of people joining in these unions. So this is what you're going to focus on for your assignment for today. So once you're done watching this video, you need to go back to Unit 2, Lesson 3. And then under here, you're going to click on this labor union strike assignment. When you get to this assignment, you're going to click here. I'm not going to open it for you in the video because you're a smart person. You know how to do that. So you're going to click here. You're going to open up a series of summaries. And then you're going to click here and open up a copy of a Google worksheet. And then on this worksheet, you're going to take the information that you're reading about each of those strikes, and you're going to tell me who was involved in the strike. So both sides, who was involved, why did the people and the union go on strike, and what was the end result? You're going to do that for each of these. So you've got 5 different strikes that you're going to be looking at. And then at the bottom here, you're going to need to make sure that you answer this question and tell me, what do you see in common? What are the things that are in common about all of these strikes? Did the end result have anything in common? Was the reasons that they were striking in common? Everything that you can tell me, what was the common theme that you usually saw? And then you need to explain your answer with details and evidence from what you read. So don't just be like, it all involved a bunch of workers who were mad. Like, obviously we know that, but tell me why, tell me who was mad, tell me about what you read about. So you're going to fill that in, and then you're going to submit it, and then that will bring you to the end of today's lesson. So as always, if you need anything from me, let me know. You know that I'm here and available for you at all times, and I will see you for the next lesson. Bye, y'all.